Welcome, everyone. This is How to Choose a Man Part 2. If you haven't seen Part 1, Terrance and I put the recording up already. Be sure to go and check us out on YouTube, check out the Patreon page, and check out the Meetup page where we also posted the link. This is Part 2 of you said about five-part series, correct, Terrance?
Yes,
Wonderful. So we just wanted to thank everyone for coming out this Saturday and giving us your time yet again. As I said before, and I'll just repeat it for everyone who was just let into the room, we have a presentation, and Terrence and I are expecting to go through that in about an hour. And this is recorded. So right now we are recording. After we are done with the presentation, we will then stop recording and we will take your live questions and provide some answers and some more feedback. And again, that portion will not be recorded. With that being said, we have our moderators who have joined us again today. They will be taking your questions in the chat and giving any help so that Terrence and I can focus on the presentation and answering your topic related questions.
absolutely.
Would you like to go first, Terrence?
Yeah, so my name is Terrance Findley. I'm a criminologist and former criminal investigator. I worked mostly out of the Metro Detroit area in Michigan. I also did some gang work, um, solving of crimes in Chicago. So basically, what we're going to do with this presentation and with the group in general is I share the profiling expertise that I've learned in my career so that we can better use discernment. So we can notice high quality people, but also notice the problematic individuals, the sociopaths, the narcissists, the psychopaths, or just those energy stealing individuals that their success comes at the expense of our happiness. And that is what I'm here for. All right, Ryan, what about yourself?
My name is Ryan, and by trade, I'm an engineer. And what I do for a passion is I take my understanding of how we build processes that work for us and that are efficient into the more human realm of relationships so that we can really understand how to discern the people that we should be spending time with, how to build the relationship we're looking for, and how to maintain a healthy and long term, lifelong relationship.
Perfect. So, so what we're going to be covering today is part two, and we're going back to the concept of relationship bankruptcy. And what I mean by relationship bankruptcy is sometimes we might need to rethink the way we interact with the individuals around us to better understand, first of all, why am I single? Second of all, why don't I have high quality relationships in my life? And the techniques we're going to go for is a lot of the ways men profile other men. So, how do men decide what person should go into their group of friends, what person shouldn't? And these techniques are often very helpful for women as well when they're trying to discern what is a high quality guy, what's a problematic guy, what's a guy's potential versus what is his progression. And therefore, all right, let's go.
So we can start with understanding a little bit about where we are in our relationship journey. And one of the best things we can do for ourselves is admit when something isn't working. So if we can understand that if things aren't working for us and we say, you know what, things aren't working for us, let's call it relationship bankruptcy. What does that entail? What does that mean? What do I need to do? So relationship bankruptcy basically describes a repeated unhealthy behavior, a repeated habit that is not working for us and often leads to a loss of trust in our personal connections. And these patterns undermine our long-term happiness because if we're not trusting the people around us and we're not confident in ourselves and we don't have a good track record, it's very difficult not only to see the opportunity in front of us, but to be able to take advantage of that opportunity. So if we focus a little bit more on what those unhealthy habits are, now we can start changing them. and focusing on then who is suitable for me and profiling for them so we can assess our own communication skills, our own emotional stability, and our core values. Once we know those, we do the same thing by looking closely at the people in front of us, around us, and the people that we are interested in. So we can evaluate them through the lens of their communication skills, emotional stability, and their core values. But more important than that, whatever mistakes we've been making is usually either because we're not evaluating the person in front of us, we don't know how to test who they really are, or we're just not evaluating them. And so, by evaluating somebody, by paying attention to the character, by paying attention to what they do and what they intend to do, and whether it matches with their words as well, that really helps us prevent ourselves from making the same mistakes over and over again. And part of that evaluation process is making sure that our decisions come from a place of information. So we need to make informed choices. So thinking about our relational history to this person we were interested in and the consistency of which our relationship stagnates, moves forwards, or declines allows us to gain a little bit more insight and make informed decisions on whether it's even worth going forward or not. And this promotes a healthier and more fulfilling long-term relationship because if it is somebody we should be interested in, if it is somebody we do want to move forward and we don't have reasons to leave, this little bit of self-awareness and introspection makes it easy on a daily basis to do the small things that are required to grow a relationship and collaborate towards something a lot greater than what we could have imagined. And the first step is admitting that something isn't working for us. Because if we can't admit that first, then we have no idea that we need to be doing something different.
Absolutely.
So the next part is once we've started to figure out what are our core values, how do we communicate with other people? What is our character? And we're moving along that path and we're evaluating the person in front of us. I'm sure a lot of us can say, man, am I wasting my time with this person? How do I know whether I'm wasting my time? Society gives us all these different rules, all these different shortcuts to try and make us make a decision as quick as possible. But a lot of these shortcuts often fall short of looking at the person in front of us. And the way we can look at the person in front of us and see some signs of not being serious about whether somebody's committed to us or has really wants to put an effort to build this relationship is they avoid making any definition or label to the relationship. They may use vague phrases like, let's just see where it goes for months or even years, and they keep the relation undefined. And what happens when we don't label something or we don't define it, like a job description, if it's not written out, it's very difficult to hold somebody accountable. So if we're not saying we're committed and we're not saying that, we're going to get engaged or we're going to get married, or we're not saying that we're loyal and exclusive, it's very difficult to then come back and say, well, I expect them to do something. And if we're not really willing to define it and sit down and talk and get to know each other, most likely they're looking to get something out of it. They're not really looking to put something into the relationship. And this is a sign a man isn't really serious about us. The next part is even if they're willing to define it, even if they're willing to have some sort of accountability, they don't talk about the future. They don't make plans with us for the future. They don't mention next year. They don't take steps to include us in their life. They don't introduce us to their family and friends. They don't develop shared goals or come up with ways that it fits together. The two lives fit together so that we can work together. And they keep everything rooted in the present. And when I say everything rooted in the present with no long-term vision, it means they're purely reactionary. Meaning, hey, it's a Saturday and I've got no plans. You want to do something? And you say, you might come back and talk to them and say, hey, I might be a little bit busy, but what about next week? And they're like, I don't know, we'll get to it when we get to it. There's no future planning. It's all about just what's happening now. And if somebody is only focused on the present or not focused on the future, an exercise we can do in many of these things to assess whether the relationship is worth it or whether we're wasting our time is if we were with them right now. Let's just assume, hey, you know what? We're married. Do I like this behavior for me? And if not, am I expecting that behavior to change? If I'm expecting that behavior to change, it's probably a waste of time. That goes towards the emotional labor. If you are having to put the emotional effort and the emotional labor into initiating the conversations, making them interesting, making plans, asking the deep questions, and bringing up issues, and the person is not providing the same reciprocal amount of effort, this will take a toll on us in the long run. And we don't want to keep sinking effort into something where somebody doesn't reciprocate the same type of effort. It's a sign that we are wasting our time and they're not serious about the commitment. A man who is serious is either going to like it and reciprocate it, or he's not going to like it. He's not going to like you. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you might not be compatible. And he's going to tell you, and you two can part ways. A man who's not serious is going to waste your time and let this keep going on for his own amusement, for whatever reason that might be. A sign of that is he only responds to you without initiating something and rarely contributes to building that emotional intimacy. So what you might feel is this feeling of limbo where, well, I'm not fully single. Like there's this man I'm talking to, and I spend time with him, and I'd like it to be more, but I can't really say that we're fully partnered. And the connection feels more like waiting for him to respond, for him to do something, waiting for him to commit, waiting for him to do what you're doing for the relationship rather than loving. And what loving looks like is being proactive, thinking about the other person, taking that step of communicating, making plans, including them in our lives, and building our relationship through experiences. And we can't have those experiences if we don't do anything about it. And what men, I'm not going to say men, I'm going to say grown up boys, people who aren't ready for a relationship, not ready to commit, they're not serious. They may just be looking for the benefit of the attention that they're getting with you or their time they're spending with you without investing. It's like waiting for free money, but in the relationship game. So they may not intend harm, but he's gaining something, maybe companionship and comfort from an avenue that's easy. Because if we keep initiating only when he responds, he doesn't have to do much work. Meanwhile, your own future remains unacknowledged and unsupported because we're putting all this work into what we hope is a relationship, and the person isn't doing anything, and a relationship is a two-way street. We cannot keep putting the effort in and hoping that something will change. And the quickest way is declaring our relationship bankruptcy, that what we're doing isn't working. And if we're treating the person right, we're doing everything else right, then the problem may be we're entertaining a possibility that we should never entertain from the beginning. And with these five quick clues, we can help set our head straight the next time we're looking into dating somebody or committing to them to see whether we're wasting our time or not.
Absolutely. So I'm going to cover something from the profiling world. and I gave them titles so it makes it easier to understand. So it's the Chad and Tyrone versus the Blake and Henry. And one of the problems that people don't realize is that high level men and problematic men move in different circles. And these circles usually don't coexist in the same locales. So if we're in a path of problems, and then we say, hey, I can't find good men, or I can't find good women around me, likely you need to look at where you're standing and say, is this where the happily married people are? Is the locale I'm at where highly happy and successful individuals that are happy about the future, that are putting towards work to become better versions of themselves, are they in the same room as me? And if they're not in the same room as you, then you're in the wrong room. And many people, their relationship world is in turmoil because they've been in the wrong room for way too long. Next slide.
Evaluating somebody, a lot of people will give us shortcuts, tips, tricks. You might have heard like basic hygiene, like does he smell good? Does he brush his teeth? Stuff like that. And they're good up to a certain point. Because after a certain point, it's actually not as clear whether a man is valuable and on his path and purpose and whether we should choose to engage with him. And what I like to say is it's what he has versus what he owns. And when we say ownership, we're talking about something, whether it's material or immaterial. If it's material, it's in his name. There isn't debt to it. He owns it, he controls it. But when we own something, we have to own up to the responsibility of it as well. So, talking from a material aspect, you may recognize the man on the far left, Adam Sandler, one of the most successful and wealthy actors in contemporary history. I am not saying he's my favorite. I'm not endorsing him in his entirety, just an example. And he is well known for when he's spotted in public dressing like a normal guy, just a normal guy. So if we want to think that a high value man is somebody who always walks around looking the best in the best suit in the best possible way. That's not the case, especially with people who are at the very top. And there's a growing trend that Terrance actually did some more research on this recently about the type of people who are buying, multiple $100,000 cars, $1 million cars, $4 or $5 million houses. How are they dressing, Terrance? Is it more people who look like lawyers and doctors dressing in suits all the time, or are they dressing a little bit differently these days?
It's completely different. Completely different. If you talk to general managers of high level real estate firms, you look at people that are selling high-end vehicles, Mercedes, Bentley, Ferrari, their average person that's actually buying the car, it looks like a regular person. It's the whole quiet wealth. If you ever read the book, Millionaire Next Door, that's what we're seeing. And it's not that a good person necessarily has a big income. However, that person has the abilities to be extremely successful in whatever they decide to be successful in. So I want you to think of the person at the company that other people go to help solve problems. The person that might be the most dependable friend you have. The person that might be the most dependable family member you have. This is the person that if they set their mind to an objective, their whole spirit goes into solving that. And in
Mhm.
2025, we have a lot of pretending to be successful, pretending to be careful, pretending to care about others. That's why manipulation is at an all-time high. Because if somebody has to fake the part, they never become the part. That's why I added something to the bottom at the bottom. At the bottom of this is a Charger Scat Pack and a Mercedes SL. I come from the finance world. I will tell you that after looking at people's finances, those were cars that look interesting. It could be, wow, that person's successful. In general, these people had terrible financial portfolios. credit scores in the toilet water. They were just amassing massive amounts of liabilities. The most reliable men I've seen, especially financially and also socially, a lot of them drove Toyotas, regular everyday cars. Now they might have a very cool car in the garage. They might have a Lamborghini in the garage, but they didn't need to impress strangers. It wasn't necessary because they had their life together. When we go deeper in the difference between Chad and Tyrone versus Blake and Henry, their success speaks for themselves. The best quote I ever heard was, "Success is my family and friends doing well. If
Mhm.
my family and friends are doing well, I'm on my path and purpose, I'm successful." And as we go deeper in the program, we're going to start noticing the difference in these circles, where they're at, where they're located, and the different keys that people use to get into each one.
Absolutely. So as moving on with the example, the man on the right, I know a lot of people who dress like him in business, first jobs, sales, where they're looking the part, but they are not the part. And we have men like Adam Sandler who are the part. He is by far a successful man in his realm of acting, and he doesn't dress like it. So we cannot automatically look at how somebody dresses and say, this person's high value, this person has money, this person is worth it. And like Terrence said, being worth it isn't all about whether they have the money. Now, the last point I wanted to make, because we spent a lot of time on this slide and we have a whole lot more we want to get to, is a man is very happy on his path and purpose without spending much. Meaning, if I don't have a wife, I don't have a family, it is actually really lonely to go buy $1 million home, even if I could afford it, and I'm the only one living there. So I might choose to own a small townhouse that's more than enough for me. But until I have that family, then I'm not going to go buy that larger house, even if I could. So we need to focus more on not what a person has, because they could have the $1 million house and be so far in debt that when you marry them, you'll never live the life that you were hoping. Seriously. They could be in debt for the Scat Pack. They could be in debt for a Ferrari. It's not about what they have, it's what they own, what is being used to move them forward in life, and what they can do in the future based on who they are now. So we need to learn about what a man truly owns and why he owns what he owns and why that's moving him forward. That's going to help us more than simply looking at his possessions.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really important because a lot of men that are young, they make the mistake of looking at what other men own and thinking that first of all, they really own it. Second
Mhm.
of all, that they're a mentor or somebody I should listen to. That's why so many young men are perfect victims for scams because they don't understand the ecosystem in which these things are created. But we're about to go right into quote unquote Chad talk. So these are the techniques of neutralization. So these are the techniques that you often find from people that are not serious. And when individuals want to network with me, when they want access to my circles, when they want to hang out, I'm going to ask them a series of questions. It's an interview. Men are constantly interviewing each other. That's why it's usually fairly easy after a while to figure out whether a guy is full of crap or not. No different than if you're in a high level interview, they're going to figure out, does this person in front of them match the resume? And these are the five ways people try to explain away their resume. First is the denial of responsibility. It wasn't me, it wasn't my fault. So if I'm asking a guy and I'm asking him about certain decisions he made, like if, back in 2008 or 2009 during the housing crisis, how did you respond to that? How did your industry respond to that? What did you do? And I want to hear what his answers were and see if they make any sense. And then I'm going to use those in relation to other questions to figure out, does this person have a pattern of making good decisions? In the world I live in, words mean nothing, actions mean everything. Words are more or less tools people use to lie about their real circumstances. But the somebody's actual circumstances, it's really hard to lie about that. So that's why you want to keep looking at why they are in front of me like they are. Next one is denial of injury. So what they're often going to do is their presence is a harmful presence towards others, but they find different ways to explain it away to it's not their fault. In the next sociopaths versus true relationship presentation we're going to do, I'm going to talk about certain serial killers. And that's a line that they constantly use. They constantly deny injury, and they also do the 100 denial of the victim. Ted Bundy was really famous for it in a very famous interview again, where he caused all these horrific crimes, and he's trying to blame everything on alcohol and his childhood upbringing, which is absolutely out of control. The next is condemnation of the condemners. So this is where someone, instead of taking responsibility for themselves, they might blame society. They might blame their circumstances. The finger goes everywhere but towards themselves. Very, very famous, very, very often used online, in certain Reddit forums as well, but I'll talk about that more on the Patreon. The next one is appeal to higher authorities and loyalties. And this is where the individual tries to make themselves holier than thou, where no one can judge me, no one can hold me accountable. Now, to a certain extent, all of us fall into using these techniques every now and then because it's hard to take ourselves accountable for everything. But it's the degree to which somebody is separating themselves from their behavior that has to be acknowledged. And it has to be acknowledged to figure out, is this person learning from their good behavior, and is this person learning from their bad behavior? And if they're not learning, then prepare for them to bring that bad behavior into your life. All right, next slide. So here's a pretty easy just slide of the Chad and Tyrone, which is a single-minded person, versus the Blake Henry, the married-minded person. Primary focus, freedom, fun, variety. Primary focus for Blake and Henry, stability, legacy, partnerships. Relationship view. They value experiences, short-term flings. And if you look at their relationship history, you'll see a lot of that. They're not stable. When you start talking about high level circles, almost everybody's married. You're either married or you're in a very, very long-term committed relationship that's LinkedIn level. I can see it with my eyes. It's written down. There's not a bunch of this weird stuff going on where the person has a hard time explaining what is their actual status. Time horizon, Chad and Tyrone, they live in the moment. They act like they're going to die tomorrow, so they don't plan for the future. So what happens is if you tie yourself this type of person, you end up not having much of a future versus the person that's constantly planning for the future. And that's going to be something that's going to show up very quickly in their life is the lack of planning in the decisions they make. We're gonna have this chart on the Patreon, so we can go ahead and go to the next slide. That's just a little chart, but we'll go into it deeper on the Patreon.
So, since the early 2000s, men who are on their path and purpose, men who want to make something of themselves, that want to find a relationship, that want to have it clearly defined and move forward, have been walking away from the stereotypical, well-known social places where everybody goes since the early 2000s. Because as it stands, most of the population does not plan for their future, whether it's for retirement, whether it's for their career, and especially, unfortunately, for their personal relationship, romantic, family life. And so, men since the early 2000s, when they look around and see people who are making decisions that are antithetical to moving forward, they walk away and go make the community of like-minded people somewhere else. This could be online. This could be in person. It could be through specific groups that meet together, but it's been happening quite a lot since the early 2000s. So one thing that we may realize in our relationship bankruptcy is if we take an inventory of the places we've been going and the places, physical or online, where we're hoping to find guys, and take a good look at the men who are coming through, do we notice that we've been getting any different results? And if we haven't, where have we been going? Perhaps we need to start thinking about where those men spend most of their time. We're going to hit on it a little bit later, but there's this idea between, the Chad Tyrone and the Blake Henry type of guy that Terrance introduced, and that is, the Blake Henry type of guy thinks more about what is the type of person I need to be. And I'm going to spend 90 to 95% of the time learning how to do it and 5 to 10% of the time actually in public and visible. Rather than the Chad and Tyrone, who we talked about, looks at what other men have, not what they really own or what that means, and copy them 90 to 95% of the time, and may only spend 5% of the time actually doing the work and learning. So, what we mostly see is people with the philosophy of fake it till you make it, but they don't have a plan and they're just doing what everyone else does. So we need to take an inventory of where we're going and what we're hoping and seeing if anything's changed or not. So, Terrence, was this my slide?
It can be, but
Yep. So I wanted to talk a little bit more in detail. Terrence, you want to take the left side and I'll take the right side?
yes. So this is something that we looked at in criminology. It started in the 2000s, and it was a growing presence of radicalism online. So the the term incel was coined in around the 90s to the 2000s. And what people didn't understand is while you had a radicalization of fairly dangerous young men, not all of them are incels, but you have that problematic world online full of narcissists, manipulators, and sociopaths that think people are owed something without work. On the other end, you had very ambitious men who were unhappy with their circumstances. They were unhappy with networking with the people around them, and they realized they could network with some of the smartest minds in the world. So you have two different types of men. These are the extremes, and they're going in different directions. So when we think of boards that you see on the news, like 4chan and Reddit and all that, that's fine. Just understand on the other end of the spectrum, the highly ambitious men out there that really want the best for their families and that really understand how networks work started moving themselves in a different direction. They started leaving the clubs. They started leaving the typical places you would think. Now, this person might be found at a community event. You might see them at a church. However, their focal group is now heavily specialized. So, like me, when I started my first business, I did what most people do that screw up their first business. You go ahead and hire the friends around you who don't know anything. But later on, I realized, hey, I could network with Ryan. Ryan's in Virginia. I got people I network to with, and they're overseas. So now I don't make friends with just the guys around me. I want to make friends with the brightest minds I can find. And this process has led to less and less quality men being available in random basic places. Yep. You're up next, Ryan.
Absolutely. Well, one thing I wanted to point out is especially around 2019. 2019 was an interesting year because this is right before the pandemic and also when some of the AI platforms that were not as well known or may not have been well known then were actually coming out. Many companies were being formed in universities, in academia, people who were tired of their jobs right around that point from doing the work for the last 4 or 5 years. And as we get into the era of the pandemic and being at home, people had a lot of time to focus on their life and what they're doing. And the men who were already had focus or decided it's time to focus had a whole lot more tools at their disposal to move forward in a more efficient way. So there are people who found out forums like Ferrari Chat exist and who to talk to and whose problems to solve and what skills they're going to need. And they learned new skills like how to use AI, how to prompt it, what areas of my life and other people's life can I really make better. So when we're talking about things like exclusive networks, to give one quick example before we move on, Discord is well known as a, team speak sort of stuff for gaming. And you can build communities, but it's so much more than that. You have a really high level of control and customization to where if you want to build a very niche in community targeted toward a specific purpose, I can control who comes in. I can give them roles and permissions, and we can organize the type of chats and documents we're putting on there without it feeling like Slack or like some enterprise platform. And that makes it a whole lot easier to connect with people and get things done. So they're not worried about the stigma of the site that they use or the app that they use. They left that at the breaking point when they realized that people are throwing labels around and not being helpful and not helping people move forward. And the way that they're moving forward is criticized, but it's not being helped. So high level men are very careful about telling people what they're working on and how they're working on it. But they can often be found in environments that make it very easy to share information with people who are willing to teach the people around them.
Absolutely. Something else, and one of the reasons we created this part two this way is so many women want to know where men have gone because they say, I don't know where other quality people are, what's going on. And one of the things to notice is this is like the 24th presentation. And that's not a question that a lot of men ask, is where to find the high quality people. Because in men's circles, within men life, if you look at some of the books that men read, like something like this, built like a book like Built to Last, um, Blue Ocean Strategy, books that men usually start reading when they're starting to like get on their path and purpose, it starts describing what you have to do to be around other high quality guys. And men are simple. Men are simple. A lot of times, a lot of the groups are stationed around what we find to be fun, whether it's boating, fishing, mixed martial arts, cars. We keep it simple. But that's just a basic entry into the crew. And then that's when you start talking about all the other stuff. Like, okay, how's your family doing? How's your business doing? Finances comes up a lot more because life is becoming extraordinarily expensive. The best things in life are free, everything else is extremely expensive. So men, especially in these circles, they want that autonomy. And especially post COVID, so many of us started working from home and realizing, man, I want to keep working from home. And when many of us were called back to the office, we just said, okay, screw this. I'm going to start my own business. I don't need you. So the money it becomes a conduit so you can make your own decisions. So if I don't like where the country is going, okay, screw it. I'll go live somewhere else. If I don't like what the governor's doing, okay, I'll move and go somewhere else. But if I don't have financial security, I can't do that. So that's one of the reasons that a lot of these circles are built firstly around getting people financially secure. So then they can actually start planning long term to actually make the difference they want in their life. And I'll explain exactly how I was like brought into one of these groups years ago. So you go ahead, Ryan. Oh, that's me. Well, a younger version of me. So that's my buddy Paul. I met him at a car show. And me and him were at a car show talking. And, I'm a criminologist. I understand a lot of criminal, theories, and I know how to evaluate people. And Paul is running a giant company. So I gave him some ideas on how to hire people and some ideas of how to start scanning for sociopathic behavior. And in response, he asked me if I want to go to an exotic car gathering at a friend of his house. I was like, okay, cool. Next, go to the next slide. Yeah, this was the friend. So you can understand at my age, I was like 31 or 32. I was done hanging out with my friends that weren't successful. Like my friends that if something was going on, I had to cover for them. If we ate out at Applebee's, I'm the one that has to cover the bill. If we all say we're going to go on an endeavor, I'm the one that has to front it. I'm the one that has to keep inspiring them. And that's how simple it is men will look for other men on their path and purpose. They will see how if that person has knowledge, skills, and abilities, and then they will poach them. And this is what's happening all over the world. And if somebody doesn't understand this process, they're going to have a lot of problems in the relationship world going 2025, 2026, and going further because everybody is getting specific. No different than most jobs. Most jobs, if somebody isn't getting very specific on where their industry is heading in the next 5 to 10 years, they're in a lot of problems. But the irony of these circles is people were dedicated. They were all talking about their families. They actually encouraged me to start taking my life more seriously. And the crazy thing is, it was harder to get in because I had to have certain skills. But once you get in, it was so much easier. We could all read books together. We could all do all these other sorts of things. And so what do you think I did? I took the high quality people I knew and brought them in as well. So when I met Ryan, what did I do with you, Ryan?
You took me.
And that's the basic premise. And
Yep.
something that just doesn't get talked about enough is people, both men and women, know about these circles and some people don't. And if you don't know about these circles, then you will continuously find yourself overrepresented in areas where good people just are not.
So after hearing all that we've talked about so far, the most important thing on our relationship journey, on declaring relationship bankruptcy, it's starting to think about what do we want, how to evaluate the person in front of us, learning a little bit more about how men operate. We need to prepare ourselves. We need to start understanding what are our emotions that get in the way? What are our bad habits that get in the way? How are we going to remove those from our life? When we're looking for a man that fits what we need, who is valuable, who's on his path and purpose, and has the ability to enrich his life and the people around him, including ours, what do I need to do in order to find him? What do I need to do in order to attract him? What do I need to do in order to be ready for him? Without preparation, we're flying by the seat of our pants and we're reacting to what comes in front of us like a Chad or Tyrone. And if we want to stay far away from Chad and Tyrones, we can prepare ourselves by not being anything like them.
Absolutely. And I don't think I was going to add to that is people don't understand how amazing it is to be prepared.
Mhm.
So, like, even when you think of the average person that's trying to apply for a job, most of them have spent very little time truly researching that company, researching the leaders of that company. In most dating situations, you'll have 10 or 15 people at a table. Almost nobody at that table knows about the focal concerns about the other gender. And if you have that skill, you just stand out so much. That is probably the number one skill I teach to my clients is you have to understand the person you're talking to. And
Mhm.
if you truly understand, it's no different than, what's amazing is we'll spend years getting a master's degree, a PhD. We'll work for a company for 30 or 40 years that has no problem getting rid of us tomorrow and just replace us. But we rarely spend time trying to learn about the person we want to spend the rest of our life with before they're in front of us. But if you do, you're at that, what is about 3 out of 1,000? Because if you look at most studies, only around 3 out of 1,000 people truly have written out goals. They have a plan to get there, and they've fully mapped out what they want from their life. And I don't mean in your head, I mean written down. When you write it down, you're 55% more likely to make it happen because now you've created a structure for your life. And that's it's it's the simple things that we really overlook. Yeah, Ryan.
So when we're talking about preparation and evaluating the opportunities in front of us, what we want, what we need to do, we also need to think about the type of guy we're going after. So Blake or Henry have great discernment, meaning they're going to think about the friends that are around them, the job that they're doing, and every interaction that they get engaged with. They are going to think about whether the person in front of them is genuine, whether they're telling the truth, whether things don't add up. They're going to discern whether uh, business proposals or ideas of investing or their friends telling them something is a good idea, they're going to actually have their own procedure of thinking through it and deciding and discerning about what the truth is in front of them and whether something is a good idea or not. And this is not something that a high value man can just turn off. They might turn off the reactions to it depending on the person in front of them, right? Like I might have a really good level of discernment to understand something's wrong, but if my mom or dad is sitting in front of me, I might think that respect is more important than trying to argue with them about it. But it's not something that can just be turned off. A high value man, a Blake Henry, it always has it turned on, is always trying to see what I see in front of me. Is this the truth or is it false? And if I'm looking at the truth, is the truth good for me or not? And this is done in a very logical and procedural fashion. And at the end of the day, it's not about being right. It's about understanding whether the struggle is worth it or not. And only then about can we get to the truth, which takes us into Terrance's slot.
So this is one of the ways men start evaluating other men is, and this is something that I notice a lot of women don't do enough of, is when somebody starts talking, the urge is often to engage that person in conversation by me talking as well. But as an analyst, as an investigator, as somebody that understands discernment, the goal is if I don't know who somebody is and I don't know what they're about, I need to keep them talking. And if they say something I don't like, I will keep the conversation going to learn more about their true intentions and the way they truly think. So we must resist the urge to set the record straight. So if somebody says something like, I don't think University of Michigan is a good school. I'm not going to jump at them. I'm gonna I'm gonna act with curiosity. Oh, really? What's going on? What did U of M do to you? I could be completely against that person, but I want to know more. If I attack that person, then they're going to start putting up their shields. They're going to put up their blinders. But I need to know the truth of who they are. As somebody who has investigated hundreds of criminals, everything from petty shoplifting to straight up serial killers, the more I can get them to talk and the less judgment they feel, the more they show me who they really are. So often, if somebody thinks this is a safe place for them to drop their guard, they will often start telling you how they truly feel about the world around them, how much they truly don't care about other people, how they feel about taking advantage of other individuals. You'll get somebody, yeah, man, I bought this car for $9,000 and this guy's an idiot, so I was able to sell it for 19 grand. What a fool. And it's like, oh, okay. All right. I see what you're about. There's nothing wrong with selling things and making a profit, but it's the mentality of it's not just I made the money, it's I made the money because I was able to trick this person. Okay, if this person continues on this pendulum, where do you end up? You end up with some pretty nasty serial crimes. So again, never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. Let them talk. Let them talk. Let them bury themselves. Next slide. Oh gosh, that's so scary. Oh,
Isn't it? Isn't it? Yeah, I did. By the way, this comes from a class called the Philosophy of Argument, which engineers have to take. And let me tell you, don't worry about trying to make sense of these graphs. I just put them there as an example. But really, this is how men think at the logical level. Whether we are making a plan, whether we are talking or discussing with people, whether we are arguing with somebody or trying to defend our position, whether at work, whether in front of investors, whatever it is, because this is the logical part of planning. And you might have heard the saying, people that fail to plan are planning to fail. But people who don't really know what it means to plan are not planning properly. So Terrence and I want to say people that fail to plan properly are planning to fail. The graphs you see here from the idea of the philosophy and argument is really breaking down the components of when I am telling you that I am right or making a statement, it's got pieces of evidence to it that I've got to use to back up what I'm saying. And when we disagree or something's wrong, it's not about attacking the person. It's where is the logical problem with what is happening? And men think like this all the time. Even if we weren't trained through the painstaking process of writing it down, this is how we are tested amongst each other. This is where when Terrence asked me, like, what are you thinking about? How are you going to solve something? And I tell him, if I tell him some wild fantasy and he can't even make sense of it, uh, at that point, just like letting our enemies continue, don't stop them in the middle of it, or not even enemies, just somebody we don't know anything about. Let them keep talking. There's a point where he's gonna figure out, am I even being logical? Am I a logical person, or did I just make a mistake and he just needs to remind me about something and I can keep going? And there's a certain point in an argument or a disagreement or a discussion or an everyday situation of, I just met this guy, I just met this woman. Are they worth bringing into my circle or not? If they say something I disagree with, part of this whole process is also what is in it for me to continue the conversation or correct them? Do I need to be right? Or is part of this whole process actually it makes more sense to keep my mouth shut and even walk away? And the person will never know that there was something wrong because it was easier for me. And this is how men operate at the logical level, and we test each other through this. And if somebody, like a woman who might be interested in a man, and a high value man who thinks like this, understands that he thinks like this, and can speak in a way that's easy to follow, where a man can do this in his head and go, she makes sense, we are already so far forward from everybody else. A lot of the time, especially because men tend to speak a certain way in our society and women tend to speak a different way, there is a miscommunication or misunderstanding. The easiest thing we can do to get close to somebody as an engineer is understand who we're talking to, just like Terrence said in all of his interrogations. What people miss is who is the person we're talking to? let's put aside expecting somebody to understand us and talk to us the way we want. If we understand how men think and how they operate, and we can embody even a small part of that, that is how we start building rapport. That is how we start building a relationship. And that's how we get past one of the easiest gates that men put up is, does she make sense? Is this conversation making sense? Is this easy to follow? And does it make sense to go forward? So I just included this just as a funny thing of it was horrible for me in college. It opened my eyes as an engineer. But this is really how men think and test each other, just at the mental level. We never write this stuff down with each other. We were just trained to do it with by the men around us.
Well, yeah, if a man's behavior doesn't make sense, I don't take the time to try to figure out why it doesn't make sense unless I'm being paid for it.
Yeah.
So if his behavior doesn't match his goals, bye. Like,
Hmm.
I don't have time. I'm not somebody's daddy. And so, like, one of the problems that we do is we spend so much time trying to justify irrational behavior from adults instead of
Hmm.
just removing these people from our lives.
Absolutely. And I think everyone on here understands the sentiment of the older we get. I mean, we could be 25, we could be 26, we could be 45, 65, 75, doesn't matter. Every day that passes, we have less patience to deal with things that are not helping us. And the less time that we ultimately have in this world, the more we naturally want to be more efficient with it. It's how it is. And so part of the passion that Terrance and I have is that we understand that people are not going to tell us what we're doing wrong unless they're close to us and smart enough to see it and loyal enough to tell us that we're doing something wrong. We might have gone years in our career, years in our relationship, years in our family making mistakes that nobody cared to point out, or maybe they don't even know that there's a problem. And that's part of the reason why Terrance and I do this. And we've been doing this for years, and we've been on Meetup for several months now, over 6 months. Where this is actually our 7th month mark of trying to make sure that we give people the information that nobody else will give them and no one else can point them towards. And part of that is comes to this slide, which is marriage mindedness versus not being ready. Because if somebody's ready to get married, we're talking about a purpose. It's not just, I don't want to be lonely, or I want the picture perfect woman or the picture perfect man in my head. It's, if I had that, what would the point be? What is the meaning? And can I clearly define a realistic end goal? If we have failed in the past, we are taking responsibility. And you'll notice as I go through these are all things that we want in our relationship from somebody else with us, because it means that they are somebody we can count on, that we can rely on, who's stable, who has a good head on their shoulders, who's going to deal with life as it comes, but also plan so that we don't have to deal with problems that we never needed to create for ourselves. And that part of that is the mindset of I should grow and adapt to become my best self. Because every obstacle that we run into, every failure that we cause for ourselves where we lack something, if we want to get better and we try, that means that we have a much higher possibility of that problem not being an issue in the future. It doesn't even come up. This includes open to constructive feedback. This includes plan for finances. Terrance and I are going to go through this more on our Patreon, so I'm not going to read everything. But before I move on, I'm going to talk about a little bit about what it means to not be ready. Avoid taking responsibility for past failures, responding to constructive criticism with the idea that we're perfectly fine exactly the way we are, and saying, why should I change? People should just accept me for the way I am. And it is the way it is. And that's okay if you're expecting everything to be the same. But if you want something meaningful and worth it and saying it's not working for me, we need to grow and adapt. And that also means not living in the moment, actually planning and understanding that our plans may require a level of sacrifice and thinking about what that entails.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I would add to that is that slide is a perfect example of why you have this divide often between millennial men and boomers and Gen X men, because there's this understanding that things are like they are and there's no way to change them.
Mm,
So maybe there's a church out there that's not doing what some of the young people think that they should be doing. Maybe there's a club out there, and I notice this a lot with the car clubs that were run by older men. They wanted it to be run a certain type of way, even though it's 2025. So, like the men of today, especially men that are millennials and Gen Z, you're only going to be able to tell them something doesn't make sense so many times before they walk away and say, "I'll make a better version of it." Like so that's why a lot of these traditional places, whether you're talking about churches, traditional improvement clubs, traditional networking centers, more and more savvy men, again, I notice this a lot of time under the age of 40, because we grew up in the technology age. We can look and say, hey, I can do something better than this, and I'm going to do it better, and I'm going to release it, and I'm going to take your best members with me. And this is how men think. I think one of the things that doesn't get overlooked enough is how competitive men are. It doesn't stop. So it just goes from I'm competitive in sports, I'm competitive in video games. Now, if you look at the top 5 to top 10 self-improvement books for men, it's all about being seriously competitive and being the best version of yourself. Not in your mind, but it observably the best version of yourself. So just wanted to add a little bit more to that. Let's go to the next
thanks,
one.
Terrence. And one last thing.
Yeah,
Since
of course.
we're competitive, I have to get the last word in. I'm just
Oh
kidding.
no.
Dude, I'm just kidding. But it just popped into my mind, and I wanted to talk about this. Is when we're talking about marriage mindedness and being ready or not ready, this is not separate from our everyday life. It's not like being marriage minded and ready is something that doesn't show when we go to work or doesn't show when we go to a movie or doesn't show when we're buying a car. It's in everything we do, and that's what people notice. It's not separate from our lives. It is entirely encompassing in who we are, and they're transferable skills. Got anything to add, Terrence?
No, you're perfect. Go ahead.
So-
So this is a quick way in which I build rapport with guys. And this isn't, I don't have a list when I'm talking to somebody, but if I had to break it down, the conversations. So one of the quick ways to know that you're in high quality circles is people are having deep conversations. They're not just talking about their job, they're talking about what they like about their job. They're not just talking about their kids, they're talking about conversations they've had with their kids and how that might have impacted them, or some of the things that are happening in their children's life that we need to be aware of. There's constant exchange of value. It's not just gossip. I can't remember the last time I was in a circle with guys, and sometimes it's 50, 70 guys in the room, and we're just gossiping. We don't have that kind of time. The world is happening. Things are happening in the world too quickly. There are so many threats out there, but there's also so many opportunities that when you can get other high quality, knowledgeable people in a room, it's like, all right, everybody pull out your notepad, pull out your books. Let's start talking. And then we kind of go from there. But one of the ways I started off is what piece of information are most people overlooking that ends up messing up their lives the most? Because that's a discernment question. I want to know what this person thinks other people don't pay attention to. And then I can ask the follow-up question, how has that impacted you in your life? What did you overlook? I will say what I overlooked, and then that person starts talking about them. And then, but this also creates some of the relationship rules that we're going to follow later on. So now we're creating a rule of transparency that going forward, I'm going to tell you the truth. Going forward, you're going to tell me the truth. That way, whatever we're saying that we have previously overlooked and that other people are overlooking, we're not going to cause the same problem. So, this is how, in the first interactions, we're creating that this is going to be a unique relationship built on knowledge, built on discernment, and built on honesty. This is something that me and my now wife, we created from I think the second or third conversation. And the fact that we went through this process, it made it so clear that this is the person I should be marrying. Because a lot of people aren't ready to go through a process like this or don't even realize how important it is. But there's a lot of stats that show people that go through this process of really talking like this, the rates of divorce drops to like 5 or 10% versus the usual over 50%. And it's just, so like when people say, oh, so many people are getting divorced, it's like, yeah, in general, if you look at what happened, the relationship wasn't started out on agreed upon principles. The principles were violated and they split up. Try to start a company that way. We're going to start a company where we don't have agreed upon principles. We're going to try to move this forward. Yeah, you're going to file for bankruptcy. It's not going to work out. But in general, people don't explain how important these conversations are. So we go through life not knowing. Next question is, what does success look like to you? And it's very important to get specific. I'm going to talk about this on Patreon, but especially when you're dealing with men, like me and Ryan started building a connection, and I build connections with other guys because we have a very specific version of what success looks like. And if it's if we're looking at a sketch, the sketch is about trust. I can't trust you until we start painting in this trust, until we start painting this in. So I need to know what you think success is, what you think success does not look like, what you're willing to do to become successful, what you're not willing to do. I need to know all these things. So if when in the dating process, when I coach people, I say you better get specific. Say, hey, if I'm just starting off, maybe I'm okay with a two-bedroom house. We need to save some money. Hey, I will be completely okay driving a Toyota Camry or a Ford Flex. I think it's extremely successful if me and my significant other, at least 2 hours a week, we can just sit and chat about our day and what we're learning. Now you start creating the actual seeds of a deep commitment because Chad and Tyrone doesn't have time for that. Chad and Tyrone just trying to get laid. And on the flip side, a woman that's not serious about a man, she's not going to do all this either. But the people that are serious start finding each other through these conversations. Next, a question that I ask a lot of men is, why do some men make it and others fail to achieve much success in their lives? Because at the point I am in now as a consultant, it's not terribly difficult for me to see where people are ending up. And it's astonishing how certain traits and the willingness to learn, that person could be homeless, and that's 5 years from now, that person can be taking care of a family. But it's that person's desire to improve themselves. And so I want to know why a guy thinks he's successful or non-successful. Next question is, what do you think being a supportive friend looks like? I want to figure out, what does the word friendship mean to this person? What are the standards of being friends? And this is a deep conversation because any man that had to become successful, I guarantee he had to get rid of certain friends from his life. He had to have done it. And one thing I noticed with males is when males get on their path and purpose, they will cut out all the other guys that were holding them back. And they will often do it quick. And it's not maliciously. It's, hey man, you want to go to the club on Saturday? Nah, man, I'm handling something else, man. I'm gonna be at the gym. And they're gonna have maybe two or three of these interactions, and then you're gonna hear all right. And that's where both men have come to an understanding. Hey, I care about you. I might even love you, but it's going to be from a distance. You're going to head that way. I'm going to head this way. And there's certain movies where this is played out, and I can talk about it if people are interested. I can put it in the Patreon. And this is that. These are these 5 steps. And if I can go through all 5 steps with somebody, I can essentially become their friend within 30 minutes to an hour. All right. So I wanted to quantify what we're saying. So I have at the bottom a quality partner meter is 94% because nobody's perfect. So the best of the best of the best people out there are only 94% good. For all these things we don't want to work on, minus a certain percentage from the quality of relationships you should expect to see in the relationship world. Somebody don't want to work on their self-awareness? Fine. Then you're going to attract another person that doesn't have self-awareness. If somebody doesn't want to work on their communication skills, fine. You're not going to attract people that often have communication skills and good communication skills. And this is what happens with certain men is they don't work on certain parts of their personality, so then the men that have those skills won't hang out with them, won't spend time with them, won't listen to them. And that is the unforgiving logic of the male ecosystem. And this is extremely true. I can show you time at book after book, movie after movie, show after show. This is talked about over and over again. And these are the rules that men deep down know. And if you don't know them, a man will show them to you. And whether that guy decides to walk the path or not, oh well. And that could be somebody's own father, that can be their brother, that can be their friend. But if that person at a certain point doesn't take responsibility for their life, doesn't take responsibility for their choices, and is a negative influence on the people around them, high quality men will get rid of that person. They will be pushed out. And more, what is happening is just like income. So I think there's 70 to 80% more millionaires than there were 8 years ago. Income is being kept at over in a certain area. What's also happening is so is goodness. People that are really, really good are starting to walk away from a lot of places. And a lot of the individuals that are empaths or that, they try to find the good in other people, they're the ones that are progressively getting left in the wrong circles. Because the more assertive people are saying, yo, forget this, I'm out of here, I'm gonna set up my own. But this is just part two. Again, we got three more parts, and this was just chapter 6 of the book. So the um the book is still scheduled to come out late September, and it's supposed to essentially give a full breakdown of the male world and the male ecosystem. Especially if somebody's looking for quality friends or a quality relationship, it should be a lot easier to see what that world looks like in a way that's never been made before. So we appreciate you for attending. All right, Ryan, let's go to the news.
Quick shout out to all of our pledge supporters so far. We just wanted to let you know that we appreciate you. We're thankful. We see you, and we continue to do what we do, especially for y'all and our supporters.
Yep, and I'm not sharing none of my coffee with you, Ryan. You're too far away.
Well, I'll visit you soon. It's okay.
Yeah, you're
I'll
gonna be
just
up here
take
in
it.
like 4 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I got the room for it. I bought you the bed. We're ready for you.
Time
So
to cause some chaos.
So again, the book is scheduled for September. We are going for all the the people on Patreon. We're gonna have a sneak peek of the workbook come out next Friday. The workbook is gonna be about noticing narcissism, and that will be coming out next Friday for the Patreon. The Patreon users will also have access to purchase the book probably a week or 2 weeks ahead of everyone else. Once the book is out, that's really when we're going to start taking things to the next level. Again, me and Ryan have spent no money on marketing, but after that, we're going to be doing a lot more workshops, a lot more events. My goal is for anyone that's really trying to put the work in to become a better person and to really understand the relationship world. I want to give you the tools what that looks like. So we will have those workshops later in the future, and a lot of them will primarily be on Patreon. But with that, our presentation has come to a hold.